The main character is preparing for his wedding with his fiancée after having gone through a traumatic breakup 12 years ago. His ex-girlfriend, now contacting him, had cheated on him the day before their wedding with his own brother. This betrayal, which involved years of a close relationship, left him devastated and emotionally scarred. After confronting both his ex and his brother, he canceled the wedding and severed ties with them. Over the years, he moved on, found a new, loving partner, and was ready to marry again. But a week before his upcoming wedding, his ex reached out to him via a new Facebook account, trying to rekindle their relationship and apologizing for what happened. Rather than ignoring her, the protagonist, with the support of his fiancée, decides to take a vengeful approach and humiliate her as payback for the years of emotional trauma she caused him. He orchestrates a plan where his fiancée and their wedding party show up at the hotel where his ex is staying, disguised with masks of the protagonist's brother's face. They present a cake with his brother's face on it, essentially reenacting the betrayal to hurt her emotionally. However, this act of revenge results in some fallout. The fiancé's friends demand an apology, believing that the protagonist's actions were harsh, but the fiancé stands by him, supporting his decision. Despite the tension with her friends, the wedding goes ahead and they get married. Afterward, the protagonist reflects on the situation, realizing that his fiancé's friends, despite knowing the backstory, prioritized their unity over understanding the depth of the situation. His fiancée, though saddened by the loss of her friends, expresses relief at no longer needing their approval. This tale ends on a bittersweet note. The protagonist has married the woman he loves, but is still haunted by his past, especially with his ex, who continues to manipulate and provoke him. In the end, he seeks closure, hoping to finally move forward, even as the emotional weight of the past lingers. It's a lot to unpack emotionally, and the protagonist's feelings of justified revenge are tempered by the complexities of relationships and the long-term consequences of those choices. The dynamic with his fiancé's friends adds another layer of tension, as they don't fully understand the depth of the betrayal, and instead focus on their own expectations and sense of justice. As much as I was relieved that the wedding was finally over, a part of me couldn't shake the nagging feeling that things were still unresolved with my ex and her constant manipulations. I'd hoped that once the ceremony was done, she'd fade into the background. But of course, that didn't happen. The day after the wedding, my phone buzzed with another message from her. This time, it wasn't from a fake account. It was her actual number. She was relentless, the soft light of the late afternoon text claiming that her love for me had never died, that I'd made a huge mistake marrying someone else. I should have blocked her number again, but I was too tired, too worn down by the whole situation. I didn't respond, but I didn't block her either. I guess part of me was still dealing with the fact that for years, I'd believed in what we had, until I saw it crumble in front of my eyes. And now, I was still being dragged into it, even though she had no right to. My wife, though, was the one who really kept me grounded during this time. She could tell when something was off, and one night she just asked me point blank what was going on with my ex. I explained everything, but I could see in her eyes that she was tired of hearing about it. She didn't want my past to keep haunting us, and I couldn't blame her for that. I don't want her controlling your thoughts anymore, she told me, taking my hand. This is our life now, and we need to move forward, not backwards. I knew she was right. I needed to let go of the past, not just for her sake, but for my own peace of mind. So, I made a decision. I sent my ex a final message, telling her that there was nothing left between us. I reminded her of the pain she caused, of what she'd taken from me, and how her attempts to reconnect were nothing more than manipulation. To my surprise, she actually replied, but it wasn't what I expected. She didn't try to argue, didn't claim she was still in love with me. Instead, her message was short and to the point. I'm sorry for everything. You were right to move on. I've hurt too many people to fix it now. I couldn't help but feel a little relieved. It felt like an end to a chapter I didn't want to revisit anymore. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't make excuses. She just let it go. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could too. The next few weeks were full of the typical post-wedding chaos, sorting through gifts, sending thank yous, and figuring out the logistics of our honeymoon. But through it all, there was a new sense of peace between my wife and me. We knew that we'd survived something that could have torn us apart, and instead, it had only brought us closer. She was my rock, and I could see how much she loved me in everything she did. The final straw came when I found out that my ex was moving out of the country. Apparently, her life had spiraled in ways I hadn't even imagined. I didn't know the details, but I heard she'd started over somewhere in Europe, trying to leave everything behind. Honestly, I didn't feel anything about it. Maybe I should have felt some sort of closure, but I didn't. What I felt was a quiet satisfaction that, for once, I was finally free. Free from the betrayal, free from the memories, free from the guilt I had carried for so long. And with that, I stopped thinking about her. Completely. As the days passed, life settled into a new rhythm. My wife and I found ourselves adjusting not just to married life, but to each other in ways I hadn't expected. You think you know someone, right? But when you wake up next to them every day, when you start sharing more than just meals or the occasional laugh, you begin to see the nuances, the little things that make them who they are. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of friction. Nothing major, just those quiet disagreements about household chores or whose turn it was to take out the trash. Little stuff that always seems to creep in when you're learning to navigate a life together. But every time we hit one of those bumps, we handled it better than we did before. We had a better understanding of each other, a deeper respect for what we both brought to the table. There were nights when I'd just look over at her while she was reading or watching TV, and I'd feel this overwhelming sense of gratitude. She wasn't perfect, I wasn't perfect, but we were building something together that felt real. I could see it in her eyes when she looked at me, too. It was like we had a secret, an understanding that what we'd been through individually had only made us stronger together. But even in the calm, life has a way of throwing curveballs. A few months after the wedding, my job took an unexpected turn. The company I worked for underwent some restructuring, and I found myself facing the uncomfortable reality of layoffs. It was a shock, not just to me, but to everyone in the department. One moment, everything seemed fine, and the next I was at home, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell was next. I wasn't scared, at least not at first. I'd always been confident in my ability to find work, to bounce back. But as the weeks went on, I started feeling the weight of it. I felt like I was failing my wife, even though she told me every day that we'd be okay, that we'd figure it out together. She was my support, but I could see the strain in her eyes too. The uncertainty that we'd both been carrying for months since I'd been so wrapped up in the past, and then in trying to keep everything steady in the present. Now, this new hurdle felt like another test we didn't need. One night, while we were having dinner, she put down her fork and looked at me with that serious expression. "I know this sucks," she said, "but we've been through worse, and you've got more fight in you than you realize." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. She wasn't trying to fix it, wasn't giving me empty promises. She was just reminding me that we'd made it through the fire before, and we could do it again. After that conversation, something shifted in me. I wasn't going to let fear run the show. I updated my resume, started networking like crazy, and even picked up some freelance projects in the meantime. But more importantly, I gave myself permission to not have everything figured out immediately. That pressure to have it all together started to fade. It wasn't just about getting a job. It was about giving myself the space to rebuild, to see things differently. Months passed, and slowly things started falling into place. I landed a new position at a startup, one that was more aligned with my values and where I could see myself growing long term. And as things settled into a new normal, I couldn't help but realize how far we'd come, not just as individuals, but as a couple. My wife never once doubted me during that time. She never lost faith, even when I did. She was my constant, the reminder that everything we faced was just another chapter in a much bigger story, and we were writing it together. We both learned something important during that time. It wasn't about the setbacks or the uncertainty. It was about the fact that we were choosing to move forward together, no matter what. In the end, Life doesn't always go as planned. Sometimes the road gets rocky, and sometimes you think you've got it all figured out only to realize you're back at square one. But with the right person beside you, the journey is worth it. I looked at her one evening, a smile creeping onto my face, and I said, "We're doing this together." And she smiled back, "Yeah, we are." That's where we are now. The past still lingers in the background, but it doesn't control us anymore. We've learned to leave it behind, to take what we've learned and move forward into whatever comes next. And that's what I'm most grateful for, being able to move forward with her by my side.